Big news coming out of Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau might actually step down. Here's the deal. His government is falling apart, and things just hit a boiling point with the resignation of Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, and his deputy prime minister. Freeland reportedly quit after clashing with Trudeau over a spending plan he pushed, which she saw as a risky political move that could hurt Canada's ability to handle the 25% tariffs newly elected U.S. President Donald Trump is looking to impose. Her resignation is a massive blow to Trudeau's already unpopular Liberal government. And honestly, it's one of the toughest crises he's faced since taking office back in 2015. Freeland's departure doesn't just leave Trudeau without one of his key allies. It also weakens his chances of holding on to power. Polls suggest he's on track to lose the next election to the opposition Conservatives. On top of that, the New Democratic Party, NDP, which had previously given him some crucial support in Parliament, has started distancing itself. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh even called for Trudeau to step down, saying he needs to go. It's not looking good for Trudeau. Between internal conflicts, public dissatisfaction, and growing political pressure, this could be the end of the road for him. Some shocking news is coming out of Madison, Wisconsin, where a tragic shooting at a Christian school has left 3 people dead. Here's what we know so far. The shooter was a teenage girl who attended the school. According to a police official who spoke to CNN, she killed a teacher and a student before turning the gun on herself. Several others were injured in the incident. The shooting happened at Abundance of Life Christian School in Madison, the capital of Wisconsin. Police Chief Sean Barnes stated that the girl's family is cooperating with the investigation, which is ongoing. Earlier, police confirmed that the shooter was found dead on school grounds. This heartbreaking incident has left the community in shock, raising many questions about what could have led to such a devastating act. While details are still emerging, this tragedy once again highlights the complex challenges around school safety and mental health in the U.S. Tragic news from Gaza. Ahmed Alou, a cameraman for Al Jazeera, was killed today in an Israeli strike on the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza. Al Jazeera confirmed the loss, and the Israeli military stated it is investigating reports about the incident. Alou, a Palestinian working for the Qatari news outlet, is the 5th Al Jazeera journalist to lose their life since the war in Gaza began. This tragic pattern highlights the growing risks journalists face while covering conflicts in the region. This isn't the first time Al Jazeera has found itself in the crosshairs. Back in September, Israeli forces raided the network's offices in the West Bank city of Ramallah, accusing the Bureau of inciting terrorism and supporting hostile activities. Al Jazeera slammed the raid as a criminal act and an attack on press freedom. The situation raises some big questions. Why are journalists increasingly targeted in these conflicts? Is it a coincidence, or is there a deliberate effort to silence voices from the ground? Whatever the case, incidents like this make it harder for the world to understand what's happening in Gaza. And that's a loss for everyone. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó didn't hold back today, calling out the EU for what he described as breaking records in hypocrisy over its stance on Georgia. Apparently, Hungary and Slovakia vetoed proposed sanctions against certain Georgian law enforcement officials. At a press conference in Brussels after the EU Foreign Affairs Council meeting, Szijjártó accused the EU of targeting Georgia because the ruling party, Georgian Dream, is a pro-peace, patriotic, conservative force rather than a liberal one. He highlighted that under Georgian Dream's 12-year leadership, average incomes have tripled, GDP has doubled, and foreign investments have surged. Szijjártó was clear. The EU has no right to question the will of the Georgian people, who've repeatedly backed the party in elections. Regarding reports of police brutality during protests in Tbilisi, he said these accounts are one-sided and pointed out that there were violent elements among the demonstrators. As for the EU's criticism of Georgia delaying accession talks until 2028, Szijjártó dismissed it, arguing it's no reason to impose sanctions. Switching to Syria, Szijjártó emphasized the importance of preventing the country from becoming a hotbed for terrorism and stopping migration waves towards Europe. He also called for an end to Christian persecution, stressing Hungary's commitment to helping Christian communities remain in their homelands. So far, Hungary has provided humanitarian aid worth 30 million euros to Syrian communities, and Szijjártó confirmed that this support will continue. So here's what's happening in Germany. It's official, Olaf Scholz's government has collapsed. This is a pretty big deal for Europe's largest economy. Let me break it down for you. It all started when Scholz fired his finance minister, Christian Lindner, last month. That move triggered the exit of Lindner's Free Democrats, FDP, from the coalition, leaving the government without the majority it needed to function. Today, the Bundestag held a vote of confidence, and as expected, Scholz lost. 207 MPs were in favor, 394 were against, and 116 abstained. But here's the thing, Scholz actually wanted to lose. Why? He's aiming to force early elections on February 23rd next year. Losing the vote allows him to ask the German president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, to dissolve the parliament later today. It's a calculated move after months of internal fights over fiscal policy and ideological differences that made it impossible for the so-called traffic light coalition of three parties to keep working together. In the meantime, the Social Democrats, SPD, and the Greens will keep things running until a new government is formed, probably sometime in spring. Not everyone is taking this collapse quietly. Alice Weidel, the leader of the far-right AfD, used the opportunity to slam Scholz's coalition. She doubled down on criticism of their migration policies and even called for the immediate deportation of Syrian refugees. Then she pivoted to Ukraine, accusing Germany's leadership of making the country a potential target for Russian nuclear attacks because of their military aid to Kyiv. Most MPs walked out during her speech. No surprise there. Scholz, for his part, hit back, calling out his former finance minister Lindner for lacking the moral maturity to govern. The opposition didn't miss the chance to heckle him during his speech. And while the fallout continues, the political landscape in Germany is shifting. Recent polls show the center-right CDU-CSU leading with 31% support, followed by the far-right AfD at 18%. Scholz's SPD is sitting at just 17%, with the Greens at 13%. The FDP and Sarah Wagenknecht's New Left Conservative Alliance are barely hanging on with around 5% each. Just enough to make it into parliament, but still a shaky position. It's going to be an interesting few months in German politics, that's for sure. So, here's the deal. Putin's making it clear he's had enough of what he sees as the West's constant provocation. He's accusing Western leaders of pushing Russia right to its red line, which he says he absolutely won't tolerate. And if the US decides to deploy short and medium-range missiles near Russian borders, Putin says Moscow will have no choice but to respond. During a defense meeting, Putin didn't hold back. He called out Western tactics, claiming they're all about scaring their own populations with the so-called Russian threat. His words, pretty blunt. They push us to the red line, we respond, and then they use that to terrify their people, just like they did with the Soviet threat back in the day. Now it's the Russian threat. What's got Putin even more worked up is the possibility of US missile deployments. He's saying that if Washington moves forward, Russia will scrap all its voluntary limitations on missile deployment. He also talked about the situation in Ukraine, claiming Russian forces are in control of 189 settlements, and emphasizing that Russia's nuclear arsenal is purely for deterrence. According to him, the number of volunteers signing up for the Russian military has turned the tide of the conflict in Moscow's favor. And here's something worth noting. Putin said over 430,000 Russians signed military contracts this year, up from 300,000 last year. He seemed pretty confident, saying, "Thanks to this flow of volunteers, we're seeing a turning point on the front line." Putin called 2023 a watershed year for achieving Russia's objectives in Ukraine, and claimed Russian forces are maintaining strategic initiative across the entire line of contact. Whether you believe him or not, this is a narrative Moscow is doubling down on as it continues its push in Ukraine. The SBU, Ukraine's security service, has reportedly carried out the assassination of Russian Colonel General Igor Kirillov in Moscow on December 17th. If true, this is a bold and high-profile move. Kirillov, head of Russia's nuclear, biological, and chemical defense forces since 2017, was killed alongside his assistant when a bomb, hidden in a scooter, exploded as they left a residential complex. He was a significant figure in Russia's military and had been sanctioned by several nations for his alleged role in the war in Ukraine. The timing is notable. Just a day earlier, the SBU had convicted Kirillov in absentia for facilitating the use of banned chemical weapons. They claim Russian forces have deployed such weapons nearly 5,000 times since February 2022, a claim Moscow denies. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials report over 2,000 soldiers hospitalized from chemical poisoning, with some fatalities linked to toxic munitions allegedly dropped by Russian drones. If the SBU is indeed behind this, it marks a new phase in the conflict, showcasing Ukraine's ability to strike within Moscow. The implications are significant, potentially escalating tensions and blurring the lines between battlefield and covert operations. So here's the scoop. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, is in some serious trouble. He's facing federal charges for fraud and corruption, and the accusations are pretty wild. Apparently, Adams accepted over $100,000 worth of luxury travel and private flights as illegal campaign contributions from a Turkish official and other foreign nationals looking to influence him. And it's not just him. Several members of his administration are also under investigation. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Donald Trump, the newly elected U.S. president, was asked about Adams's case during a press conference at his Mar-a-Lago resort. His response? "I'd consider pardoning Adams." Classic Trump. He admitted he didn't know the details of the charges, but still left the door open for a potential pardon. But that wasn't all Trump talked about. He also took a swing at the Biden administration for selling unused parts of the border wall. Trump called it a criminal act and claimed it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars more to rebuild the wall later. He even said he's been in talks with Texas officials, including Attorney General Ken Paxton, about blocking the sales. For context, Congress had allowed the Biden administration to sell or donate unused wall materials as long as they were used to repair existing barriers, not build new ones. Biden had also been asked to account for the storage costs of these materials, but Trump sees this as another way to slam his predecessor. In true Trump fashion, he didn't hold back on other topics either. He warned federal workers that if they don't return to their offices, they'll be fired. And then, in a surprise move, SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son joined him on stage to announce a $100 billion investment in U.S. projects over the next 4 years. That's a big win for Trump, who's been focusing on foreign investments and striking deals since his election. To top it off, Trump recently posted on his Truth Social platform that anyone investing $1 billion in the U.S. would get fast-tracked approvals and permits. Clearly, he's already in full deal-making mode even before officially taking office. New footage has surfaced from the explosion site in Moscow, where Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, head of Russia's nuclear, biological, and chemical protection forces, was killed. The video shows a bomb disposal robot at the scene, working just meters away from the bodies of Kirillov and his assistant, who died before emergency services arrived. Early reports suggest the explosive device was hidden in an electric scooter parked near the building. The scooter has since been removed for forensic analysis. The explosion caused significant damage, shattering windows in nearby apartments and damaging several parked vehicles. Engineering teams are now combing the area to ensure no additional explosives are present. The blast, which occurred early yesterday morning on Ryazansky Prospect, claimed the life of one of Russia's key military figures. Kirillov was known for his leadership of the NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical forces, and for his accusations against Kiev, including claims about the use of toxic substances and biological agents on the front lines. This incident has sent shockwaves through Moscow. Russian security services are conducting a thorough investigation to determine how such a high-profile attack could happen in the heart of the capital. It's a stark reminder of how the conflict's reach is expanding beyond traditional battlefields.